I've been tossing around the idea of doing an FAQs video for a while now. I've compiled questions from channel members, subscribers, and patrons alike to bring to you, and so the wait is over. Let's get into it.
Hey, Jim.
Me?
Yeah, you.
What the hell is going on?
Everyone knows you think toys are fun, but this is a channel for adults.
I know.
Yeah, I said it. If you're under the age of 18, make sure you get your parents before you come in here.
I'm sorry, is there a point to you being here?
Of course there's a point to me being here. You've got this lineup of questions ready to go, but the fact is you haven't established context. Sure, you've been doing toy videos for a year, but this YouTube channel is almost 10 years old. Why don't you talk about that? This isn't even your first YouTube channel. Why don't you talk about that? If you're going to go to the trouble of making an FAQs video, why not put in the extra effort and give the people the whole story about who you are?
You know what? Fair enough. Lay it on me.
Let's get on with the show. Anything you want to say before I get into it?
Actually, I have a lot that I want to say before we start getting into the deeper details of my history and the FAQs. So give me a minute, will you?
The floor is yours, bub.
Well, gee, thanks. I appreciate it, I guess. We're going to get into the history of a lot of things in today's video, but I want to be clear that I would not be here right now without the toy collecting community. Point blank. Without you, I'm not doing YouTube in this way at this frequency and certainly not with the drive to have better quality, which I keep trying to do. And your feedback helps. So I appreciate you. The fact is, when you guys heard I had a channel and I started making content that was catered to toy collection, you guys have latched on and you've been a great help. You've been very supportive, and I cannot thank you enough for that. But I'm going to try. On top of that, I have to thank the folks that were early adopters of this channel when it had a different focus. From back in 2013 and 2014 all the way through to now, there have been some folks that have stuck around through thick and thin watching what I do. I see you, I appreciate you, and I wouldn't be here without you either. There are a lot of other creators on YouTube and elsewhere that have helped me along the way to get where I am, either by graciously having me on their shows or being even more gracious enough to come on to mine, which certainly increased optics and helped establish a tone for where my content was going. It means a lot, and I am going to name names here. And before I get into naming any names, I want to be very clear. I do have notes with me. This is semi-scripted, and I've gone to some pretty great lengths to make sure I got everyone I could possibly think of. But if someone has contributed to this channel, whether as a viewer, as a collaborator, a friend, a fan, everything in between, if I don't name your name, I promise and I swear to you that it is not intentional. I just wanted to get that out of the way, because I am grateful for everyone who has touched this channel in any way, shape, or form, past, present, or future. So I thank you. In the aftermath of Iconicon 2021, of which I was just a viewer, I hadn't even really begun collecting toys again until after that convention started. People began to recognize me in chat and saw me on an after show that Gen X Toys Geek and Chris Miwa put on, and my name started circling around a little bit. I ended up being in contact with Tony Roberts from Analog Toys, who was very gracious with his time and energy and had me on his show to interview him post the Desert Rat announcement, which was an honor and a privilege, one of the best experiences I've ever had. He went further to come on to my show to further the discussion more in the direction of collecting and toys and things of that nature. Again, something I will always be grateful for. Thank you. I appreciate you. I don't tell you that enough. One of the best things that I got out of Iconicon 2021 was being introduced to some channels I didn't know. And one of my favorites, without a doubt, is 2 Cents Toys. I watch his stuff a lot, and Sal is a one of a kind. He also, very early on, made a point to come onto my streams and just have frank conversations. And I'm going to be deadly, brutally honest here. I don't know how the hell he managed to be patient with me in those early days, because those streams, by and large, were unfocused. They were rambling. And let's face it, I had a few too many beers on a couple of them. So, Sal, for coming onto a channel that you didn't have to come onto, for taking the time multiple times to talk about various things and allowing me the freedom to kind of learn and grow about what I wanted my live streams on YouTube to look like, I will always be grateful for. I thank you. And again, I don't tell you enough. Michael and Melinda from Retro Blasting, from the very get-go, have been supportive and wonderful to talk to when I've had the opportunity. Michael is just a treasure trove of knowledge. One of my favorite memories with him is talking about the Prince of Thieves Robin Hood line and how the Kenner molds were reused, some of them anyway, from Superpowers, and how it might help me fill out some things from Superpowers, albeit with a need to repaint. It was an interesting conversation and one that I'll never forget. And I shouldn't neglect to mention that one of my favorite interviews of all time is interviewing him, forcing us not to talk about toys. It was a ton of fun. He was generous with his time and his candidness, and I will always appreciate it. Thank you so much. Dean from All Things 80s Toys. I really enjoyed the content that he brought to Iconicon. I've liked a lot of the stuff since, and he, of course, has been on the show in the past and has had me on the show as well. All of those experiences at the time for me were wonderful. I appreciate you, Dean. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you'll continue to do well because you deserve it. Thank you for everything, my friend. Chris, Scuba Pete, and Jeff Barker from Chasing 80s Toys. What an amazing group of people and a unique experience inside of the toy collecting content creation space. They always bring different perspectives, but yet they gel together in a way that very few teams do. And to see them continuing to ramp up and become more confident in the format and styles that they're doing is just a blessing to the scene. And I'm so grateful that it's working for you. And thank you all for coming on the channel more than once, separately and together, because the conversations we've had are among the best that I've had. Thank you so much, and keep doing what you're doing. Matt Swafford of Reclaimers Vintage Toys and Endless Bullets podcast. What a mensch you are, sir. This guy probably knows more about toys than anyone I know. It is scary how much trivia he has in that head of his. And, we had that one stream where we were sorting through toys of a lot that he had purchased. I learned a lot, and I've already forgotten most of it, so thank goodness that was recorded. He is one of, if not the single best reseller of toys on the market today. His attention to quality and consistency are second to none in my personal experience. As a matter of fact, he sold me my very first vintage toys ever. That is a memory I will never forget. I thank you for your time, your generosity, and just being who you are, because we need people like you in the space. Thank you. Rob from Order 42. What can I say about you I haven't already said? Probably not much, but let's give it a shot. You are an amazing person, top to bottom, back to front. We first met when I was auditioning for Adventures in Game Chasing, and we became fast friends on the set of the film, and even more so afterwards. It has been my privilege to spend time with you at conventions, to travel with you to conventions, and even if we never do that again, I want to say that I have cherished the time that we have spent in those endeavors. Every time I get a chance to see you, I am overjoyed because you are just so much fun to be around. You've had me on your show, I've had you on my show, and those are some of the best conversations I've had ever. You're an amazing, intelligent, thoughtful man, and I'm really grateful to see that your content is starting to tick up a bit on YouTube, because more Rob, the better. Billy J. Melvor of the Game Chasers and Toy Chasers. Where to begin? Well, probably the Adventures in Game Chasing movie where we all more or less met. Amazing experience. Cannot wait for a wider audience to see it. And both Billy and Jay have been on the show as well as Melvor, who's actually helped me transport some of my collection at different points. But you guys were always very supportive, from the beginning. From the very beginning. I love you guys. Again, wouldn't be here without you. Thank you. If I'm going to mention the Game Chasers, I have to mention 8-Bit Eric and OK Chief, also co-stars of that film. Amazing friends, amazing channels. Thank you for your support and your brotherhood. I appreciate it. In the same vein, but no less true, Retro Wolf, thank you for your support and really pushing things from your side, having me on your show as well. It's appreciated, and I'm grateful to see that you have stuck with this little glint in your eye that you had 3 years ago, and I hope that you reach all of your goals. You're a great guy. Always a pleasure to hang out with you.
For crying out loud, do you ever shut up?
Hey, there's still more people to thank.
I was afraid you'd say that.
Will you relax? Iconicon 2022 has come and went, and since then, I've met up with a lot of other channels or rekindled relationships with some of these people, and I'm just having a blast with new content and new friendships alike, like Zazel and Sergeant Slaughter's Slaughterhouse. Say that 3 times fast. Great guy, great channel, love the support, cannot wait to have you on. Thank you for all you do. Ken from Toy Connections. We've been friends almost since the beginning, and I have cherished every conversation I've had with you. And as I record this, I just appeared on his show for a Motu roundtable. Great discussion, had a blast. Man, you're thoughtful, you're polite, you're genuine, everything that I look for in a content creator, and it's a pleasure to watch you grow. I hope it continues because you deserve it. Bill from Weird Fantastic Toy Adventures. Man, with you, it's been a ride, brother. I remember seeing you come into chat and not making the connection immediately. But I had been looking at Bill's blog, getting information about the Superpowers collection when I first started collecting them up. And then he just randomly shows up on my damn stream, blew my mind. And your friendship and input has been invaluable. I hope that you get all of the goals that you're setting for yourself. You're just a hell of a good guy, and I love spending time with you, brother. Can't wait to do it more. Masters Maniac Mexico, whom I met through Bill. My friend, you are a fighter. You are going to get through this, and I am grateful for all the time we have while we have it. I love you, and I will see you soon.
Are you done?
Not by a long shot, Grumpy. I'm sorry to hold you up, but there's just a few more people I need to thank. There are a lot of people who have been consistently supportive from the very beginning prior to toys, through the toys now, and hopefully in the future. You comment, you hit the like button, you just crank up the view count without saying anything. You guys are the backbone of this channel. I love you. Thank you for being here. Taking things a step further are patrons, channel members, people who have sent donations, whether monetary or physical, of a toy or an item or a keepsake, or have just helped me procure something where we, booked a deal or something like that. All of you have done immense things to contribute to this channel, each and every one of you, and I can't thank you enough, but I will name a big group of people directly. Gen X Toys Geek, aka Jody, Johnny, Ted Millich, Jason Garcia, Master Son 42, Boba Hicks, Jim Largo, Will McLaughlin, Brendan Haley, Jim Salzberg, Gojatron, Falcro, Sarah, Tony, Rez1198, Zach, Jesse Hughes, Sal from 2 Cents Toys, Nerd Rage, Matt Swafford, Melvor, Billy, Jay, Pixel Dan, 8-Bit Eric, that dude. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I know I've said this multiple times. I don't say it enough. Thank you. I also want to call attention to anyone who's ever been a guest on my show or who has had me on their show as a catch-all. Thank you for your time and collaboration. I also want to thank the folks that stuck with my content through a lot of different changes over the last several years. Aussie Rules, Bennett, Jill, Sarah, Tony, anyone from the Destiny crew, Twitch days, all of it. Thank you.
I really hope you're done. I don't have all day to ask you these questions.
Fair enough, fair enough. Go ahead and ask your questions. I'm ready to answer.
It's about time. Jeez. You sure can rattle on a lot. You said you've been doing this for a while. What else have you done?
Well, if we're talking about content creation, I'd say that my history goes back to the very early 2000s when the internet was still in its infancy and people were still learning how websites worked and stuff like that. You know, I wasn't part of like the GeoCities, Yahoo message groups kind of thing that really started in the late 90s. I kind of came into some of that stuff early, but as early as 2003, I was doing interviews with different bands and people related to like the genres of music that I'm into, like metal and stuff like that. And I was putting them on a website called Horns Up. I ran that with my ex-wife, who is as huge a fan as I am, and she was a huge part of that entire process. But we were doing things like recording audio for the interview on cassette tape and then transcribing it by hand. And it was just a print, webzine. I would do, CD reviews, stuff like that. Got featured on a few pretty big bands' websites because that's how you spread the word about reviews back in the day. It was just websites and aggregate websites. Social media didn't exist at all yet. This also coincides with the tail end of my being in the Marine Corps. And as I transitioned from the Marines into being a musician, some of those connections really helped push things along. But eventually it got to a point where I was more focused on playing music rather than reporting on it. So I just began focusing on that after a move to Chicago. By 2005, I was a member of the death metal band Cardiac Arrest, where I would stay until early 2011. During my nearly 6 years in the band, we released 4 records, a bonus DVD, several demos, multiple splits. We co-starred in a horror movie together, toured all over North America, and it was a whirlwind, and it's one of my favorite group of memories ever. While I was active in Cardiac, YouTube was just starting to come up, and it became an easy tool to upload video and get something to somebody else pretty quickly just to watch, which was my actual start on YouTube, on the YouTube channel that's just called Grindhead Jim, which is separate from this one. My very first YouTube video was taken with a Kodak digital camera with me just moving my hand trying to explain a drumstick technique. Then I updated it with the same camera with me actually playing and blowing out the audio like crazy before later moving into using a camcorder and some basic editing through, Windows Movie Maker for some actual drum instructional videos that people were asking me to put up because they were either into the band or they'd found the video at random or were asking me through like Derek Roddy's forum where I became a moderator. These are the kinds of things that I was making at the time. And in the background, I was always recording shows and editing them together. And, the Hangout stuff, everything I could think of between, potential DVD releases, future YouTube content, bonus stuff that fans are really into. And it was something that I was very passionate about. And I still have hours upon hours, if not days, of unreleased footage from those times. Maybe they'll see the light of day at some point. I don't know. But it was really starting to inform my love of editing and shooting and everything in between. So it really started in earnest during, that time in the band, starting around 2006. And all the way up until I left the band in early 2011, I was recording in the studio and some other things, and we were putting out the occasional YouTube video, stuff like that. When I left Cardiac in early 2011, I kind of put the camera down for a while. Fast forward to mid 2012, I'd lost my job due to some corporate resizing, downsizing, whatever you want to call it. And I had some time on my hands. And I had rediscovered my love of retro video games as well as the current generation at that point. So I started collecting a lot of retro games, and also at the same time, which seems like it's not really related, but it all happened at the same time. I started reviewing films in, that classic angry reviewer style that was so prevalent from AVGN and Nostalgia Critic and stuff like that. This was the format du jour of the time. And I wanted to throw my hat in it because I felt like I had something to say. So I started the website That Ruled. And it also had a corresponding YouTube channel and a Blip TV channel, which was an alternative to YouTube that was very prolific at the time. And I was, reviewing movies that I loved, but picking them apart and trying to be critical and also make some jokes along the way. And I was just having a lot of fun doing it. I did mix in some video game related content, but not a lot because the equipment I had just wasn't up to the task. So I focused on the movie stuff because it was something I was able to do. The limitations of my equipment was never more evident than my very first live stream ever in fall of 2012 with the aforementioned Zach. I refer to Zach as the guy that taught me how to stream. We did, for our very first stream ever, 24 hours for charity with, we didn't have any lead up time. He and I just planned it over a couple of weeks and then just did it. And we were able to raise $500 for a local children's hospital under the Make-A-Wish banner, I believe. Might have been St. Jude's. I honestly don't remember, but $500 in 24 hours for a guy who's never streamed before on a computer that could barely stream at 240p, I'll take it. By this point, the That Ruled brand, if you will, was gaining a little bit of steam in the underground of those circles. And I started to meet people like Skeletroy Blockbuster, Alex Fireheart, Samantha Maybe, Grant Beard, and a slew of others. We ended up deciding to make ThatRule.com an aggregate that we could then just have all of our stuff in one place to show. Again, at that time, that was very common, to do, so that more people got more eyes on your stuff. And when you collaborate like that, it really opens up ways of, crossing over different content at a time when live streaming was in its infancy. And, for pre-recorded video collaboration, there's a lot of coordination that happens, and we got pretty good at it. And those are some of the best times that I'll remember. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, this year also is the 10-year anniversary of that website, which is in a state of disarray, I'll be the first one to admit. But there are a few things we might be doing this year to commemorate that, because it's not every day you hit that kind of a milestone that basically 4 people remember. So let's be honest with each other. It was also around this time that Blip TV just went completely away, forcing us onto YouTube, where reviewing films was a very sad state of affairs with copyright claims and no one obeying fair use on either side properly. And I moved away from doing films and decided to move closer into, gaming related content, nudged gently along by Grant and Troy, because that was something that they were doing on a podcast. I, elbowed my way in because I wanted in on the conversation. They, gleefully, if not begrudgingly, had me on, and we started doing that. And at a certain point, I thought I was kind of done with gaming. I didn't really have any interest in beefing up my PC at the time, so that was out. And at the time, PlayStation and Xbox weren't on anyone's, best of the year list until E3 of that year. And PlayStation really hit it out of the park. It renewed my interest in gaming in general, and pretty single-handedly saved me from just not playing games for a long time, because I was really, really dejected at that point. And with all of the features that the PS4 touted, it was like, oh, I don't have to get a computer to keep doing content. There's a camera, and they're going to have this editing suite. You can stream right from the console. this might be the answer to all of my problems. More or less from the time the PlayStation 4 was released, I started doing content again through several different avenues. The editing suite in the PS4 was nothing to write home about, but it was passable. I also had a tablet for the first time, and I was using that to shoot very basic video game content on this channel. I was reporting on gaming news, any pickups, really down and dirty one-shot reviews, things like that. And at the same time, through the PlayStation itself, I started streaming on Twitch and experimenting with that format, getting comfortable, getting an idea of how that stuff worked. And I would start to refine that over the course of the next year. When I did get a bug to update my PC, although it was because I wanted to get better at streaming and making content. Starting to see how all this kind of links together.
Not really, but keep going.
By this point, I was really getting into the current generation of games, and I thought that Watch Dogs was going to be this huge thing, and it really wasn't. Then Destiny came out and just captured my imagination, and I focused almost all of my gaming content on that. To the chagrin of my subscribers, I did not pay attention or heed the advice of people that told me different, but I went in this direction, and arguably it may have killed my channel. But by this point, I was over on Twitch streaming very, very consistently, and that was growing, so the YouTube stagnation didn't bother me that much. I would put some stuff from Twitch onto YouTube and kind of make it this place where you could go to watch things in long form after the fact. And for that, it worked well enough. And I would occasionally do a thought piece or something like that, but mainly it served as kind of a place to put smaller bits of my Twitch streams on YouTube, and that's where it kind of stayed for quite a while. So between 2013 and 2015, that's when the Destiny stuff was really, really starting to pick up. But if you fast forward all the way to 2018, really all you were seeing on this channel was gaming related stuff. And it wasn't until the end of 2017 I started doing long form interviews and podcasts, things like that. And they ended up on the YouTube channel almost always first. And that became a mainstay of the live streams I was doing over on Twitch as well, where I would have a topic of discussion. And it could be anything from, gaming news, pop culture, even a little bit of politics, to be perfectly blunt. And I would take, just the whole talk, put it on YouTube, but the rest of the stream where I'm just playing Destiny for 3 or 4 hours, that stayed over on Twitch where it belongs. And this was kind of the cycle all the way through to early 2019. And what's interesting to me about this is that right around the time I'm starting to feel like there's a bit of stagnation, something comes along and inspires me. And that happens to be the Adventures in Game Chasing movie Kickstarter. I'd been watching the Game Chasers and the Toy Chasers for several years at that point, considered myself a big fan, albeit a silent one. I wasn't like one of those guys that would comment on everything and so forth. I wasn't involved. Not the way that I am now with everyone that I like, and certainly more than I should be doing. But I watched everything and I loved it. Then I find out that they're trying to get funds to do a film. I get really invested in the idea of that, start watching their show again, and I get inspired to start collecting retro games again and doing hunting, and of course doing hunting videos, which started the whole game grinds thing. And I did several episodes of that. It was like a 8-month stretch. I was just having a great time doing it. And then I moved from like South Central Texas, the Houston area, up to DFW, where I have been since October of 2019. That put a really big stop to my retro gaming hunt videos at the time, because as soon as I got here, within 3 or 4 weeks, I was on the set of the Adventures in Game Chasing movie, which is a whole story in and of itself. We shot the principal photography of that movie in 3 weeks in November of 2019. By early 2020, it was very apparent that there was more to be done on the film. I mean, every film needs pickup shots, and we were starting to gear up to do that. I found myself in this smaller place to live, and I was looking for more reliable work. And within 2 or 3 months, I had that. But that 2 or 3 months was very touch and go, and there are a lot of people that made sure that I didn't go without, and I will never ever forget that. Once I secured a solid job, which I still have to this day, I was ready to look into doing more content, but I had a problem with the internet connection here. So streaming was completely out at the time. I tried it several times with varying degrees of success, but it never really picked up. And as a result, I just kind of said, this isn't going to work right now. I have to put it on ice for now. The pandemic's in full swing. I missed that boat. It is what it is. What's funny about what happens to a person who creates a lot of content or has drive to do that, if you consciously decide to take a step away from it, especially for an extended period of time, you get much better at consuming content to the point where I was, watching friends stream and occasionally participating on theirs, like Rob from Order 42 was a mainstay, and I loved those experiences. But the rest of the time, I'm watching YouTube, different streaming services that I already had, Blu-rays that I was picking up for the first time, things like that. I was just consuming content and just kind of trying to relax and enjoy myself, to be honest. Fast forward again to early 2021, and I can start to feel the wheels are starting to turn. I want to start thinking of something else. And one of the things that I was doing was trying to lose weight. And I had a vlog I put up here about losing weight. And frankly, it's going well, but I just didn't latch onto the whole vlog format. It lasted a whole video. So it is what it is, but I don't like deleting content. So up it stays. But just after that, I was about to do a commentary on this channel for Raiders of the Lost Ark with Rob from Order 42. It's still on the channel. Check it out if you want to. I think it's a lot of fun. And I've told this story a lot of different times. But the short version is that in doing research for that, I come across an Oliver Harper video about the film who just in passing mentions Retroblasting's channel as a resource for, information about the toys. We went, did the Raiders of the Lost Ark commentary, and I immediately started watching retroblasting stuff. And then that became the only thing I watched for like 5 or 6 weeks, it felt like. It might have only been 3 or 4. I don't remember the timing exactly. But by the time that was done, I was, passively familiar with a bunch of other channels, and I started watching Analog Toys. And I was really starting to dig deep into that. And then Iconicon happens. And from here, I think most of you know the story. For those that don't know, it was during the Iconicon 2021 inaugural, virtual convention that I finally just tipped over the bucket and said, hey, I'm going to try to start collecting toys now. As a matter of fact, it was Matt from Reclaimers Vintage Toys that sold me my first vintage figures, a Superpowers Lex Luthor and a Superpowers Steppenwolf. And that, as they say, started it all. Next thing I know, I'm diving headfirst into research, trying to figure out what toy lines I want and how I want to collect. And it's still an ongoing process, to be honest. But from the moment that I received that Lex Luthor and Steppenwolf, along with some Marvel Legends that I had just ordered on a whim, that became the foundation of all of my toy content, which evolved very quickly over time, just trying to solve problems of shooting, editing, format, tone. And it's always an ongoing process because if you ever stop and just do one thing for too long, you stagnate. And, evolution is like growing, and with growing, there are pains. The way the things were set up around here, it wasn't really conducive for making content. It made it a lot more work than it needed to be. And it would, be several months before I got to the place where I'm in now, where making content is a lot more intuitive for me and I'm comfortable with the format. I'm still always going to tweak something here and there, but that first, I'd say 6 to 7 months really informed me on all the problems that I would have to solve to be comfortable in this space. And I thank all of you for your patience while I did that.
Hey, I thought you were done thanking people.
Complain about it, why don't you?
Well, fine. Now we're all caught up. Now, let's talk about toys. What were some of your favorite toy lines as a kid?
There's a lot, so I'm going to kind of just go through the whole thing from kid to adulthood and save you the trouble of asking me each stage of my life. As far as I can tell, my earliest toy memory is of Pulsar. He didn't have his shirt anymore, but he had his, sweatpants, whatever you want to call them, and the Frankenstein shoes, and his action worked great. I really enjoyed the hell out of this figure, but I didn't have anything else to go with him, so he just kind of hung out with me. And the next thing that I know, I'm playing with some. It might have been Mego Pocket Heroes because I do remember having a Batman with a rubber cape that just kind of flapped around. I don't know if that's actually Mego Pocket Hero or something else, but I have a memory of it. My mother tells me that I had a Batman birthday cake when I was very young. Aside from pictures, I don't remember it. So where that came in, I can't be certain. But next thing I know, it's Motu in '82, some Dukes of Hazzard figures in the car, and a Dukes of Hazzard guitar, and Star Wars stuff coming out my ears. Tons of that stuff at a very early age. I have also fond memories of the Stompers, little trucks that would sit there with batteries and I really liked Stompers. And it was around this time I started getting into G.I. Joe, which led me right into '84 when Superpowers came out. I've told that story. So now we're talking, Superpowers, G.I. Joe, then Transformers come along, and I'm super into those because all these cartoons were just constantly flowing through my brain, and I fell in love with all of them. And, every time I look around is something different. And I remember, being at the height of all of that in '84, along with getting a lot of really great Black Star figures in '84. I don't know if they were going on clearance or if there were reissues. I honestly don't know the history, but I got the bulk of my Black Star figures in '84 as I can recall. For the next 2 years, it was Superpowers, Transformers, G.I. Joe, just tons of it. As we get into '85, '86, and beyond, you get into some different stuff like Air Raiders and Sky Commanders, Mask. I loved Mask as a kid. Just kind of taking a sampling from, all the different lines and having some fun with it. Never having a complete set of anything with Superpowers being the closest to that. But man, it was almost like a rotating door and I loved it. My parents didn't, and we ended up getting rid of most of my toys by the end of the decade. But not before I started collecting Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I hung on to those for a long time until I sold them in '93 or so. But the bug still wasn't dead yet because Toy Biz was doing some great things with Marvel, and I would piecemeal those from time to time all through high school. And certainly that led into those first Todd McFarlane Spawn figures because they were a step above from what was on the market at the time. I got through wave one, part of wave two, but at some point it just became too difficult to juggle wanting to get equipment for my drums, buying CDs, buying VHS, anything else. I started to date at that time, so like money was a factor there. Something had to give, and at that time and place, it was toys. So by now it was what, '95 at the absolute latest that this happened, and that was kind of what I felt was the end at the time. Fast forward to 2000, I'm in the Marine Corps, go to a few different places getting education, and then finally my first duty station in Georgia, and things start to settle a little bit. Towards the end of that period of time, someone gave me Terminator 3 action figures, the T-800 and the Terminatrix. Those were the first toys that I owned on my own in almost 10 years. And it wasn't long after that that, I'm playing Halo out of the Marine Corps. People start to see how much I'm into that. And someone got me a Halo 2 action figure for my birthday with a shotgun, because if you know, you know. And this more or less carries us all the way through up to the Destiny days. And I was working in the same place as a lot of people that I played Destiny with. And in the particular call center we were at, and Nerd Rage can tell you because he was there too, it seemed like everybody had toys at their desk. A lot of Funko Pops.
Ugh, I hate Funko Pops.
Not really that big of a fan myself, which is why it took almost 3 years of being in that environment to just kind of relent and say, okay, I'll get a Spider-Man one and a Godzilla one and call it good. And for the most part, I've kept that. And then the toy drought continues until 2018 when my girlfriend at the time got me another Pop, but also, and this is more interesting to me anyway, a Savage World Pinhead from Hellraiser 3, which just happens to be sculpted in the same scale and overall look as Motu. Mere weeks before Iconicon 2021, for my birthday, I was given a Leonard Xenomorph and a 6-inch Godzilla from the Godzilla vs. Kong line at the time. So that's almost every toy or toy line that I have collected at any point in my life since I was a baby.
Well, that's all well and good, but are you seriously telling me everything started with Iconicon 2021?
Yeah, that's really what I'm saying. Sense of community, reverence, mutual excitement. I was learning so much in such a short space of time. I was reawakening and tapping into memories that I hadn't touched in 20 to 30 years. It was this whole other side of myself that I thought was gone, being given life again. And that's what inspired me to start collecting and put that energy into content. And that's where we find ourselves now.
Does that mean I actually get to ask the frequently asked questions from viewers and patrons?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it does. Go ahead.
Thank you. These first few questions relate to your military career. Why did you join the military in the first place?
That's actually a pretty easy answer. I was homeless. I was already out of the house. My parents and I weren't getting along very well, and I had too much pride to ask them to take me in. But at a certain point, I'd had enough, and I decided, along with my good friend Tony Malik, that it was time for me to make that big change and join the military, which was something I had railed against for a very long time. But once I made that decision, I stuck with it. Initially, I was going to go into the Navy. For whatever reason, I don't know why I thought that was the best move, but through a series of unlikely events, I ended up asking if I could join the Marines instead. And oddly enough, the Marines snapped me up. Probably had something to do with my ASVAB score being as high as it was, but I'll never know for sure.
Huh, I didn't know that. What did you do in the Marines, and why did you choose that?
Because I had a much higher than average score, basically my recruiter told me, you pretty much can pick whatever you want, and there's a good chance that you're going to get it. I was flabbergasted. I didn't know what the options were, really. And just as a fluke, I said, I think it'd be kind of cool to do something like intelligence. His immediate response, without missing a beat, was, we could do that. There's a couple different types. There's this, and there's this, and there's this. And I chose signals intelligence. And I went with that because it sounded more technical and a little bit more fun. And also, he talked me through the different, day-to-day of each one, and I thought that was going to be the one. And I'm glad that I picked it because it really spoke to my entire career. I got to just do so many different things that you normally wouldn't get to do in other, military occupational specialties. And I'm so glad that I picked that. It was some great experiences for sure.
Well, if the experience was so great, what drove you to leave?
Well, honestly, it's a couple different things. I was just about to get married for the second time, and although she was on board for me to go career Marines, I was frankly getting pretty badly beat up. My back and my ankle and a bunch of other things were going wrong left and right on a consistent enough basis that my commanding officer pulled me aside and said, I can't have you re-enlist because if I send you into the Fleet Marine Force, which you will have no choice of, you can't be in a garrison command, you're going to get yourself or someone else hurt, if not killed. Your body's just not able to keep up with all these injuries. That was a really hard pill for me to swallow. I thought I was going to go career Marine Corps. That was the plan, but it wasn't in the cards. Knowing that this was going to happen, my enlistment was coming up, I started looking for work in the civilian sector doing what I did or something similar. And I was at that point specialized enough that I couldn't just apply for any old job. They would either give me the you're overqualified routine or my specialty took me too far away from what they would want to teach me to do. So ultimately, nothing materialized right away. So we were forced to make some decisions. And the decision we made was to move to Chicago and to really give a go at the music career. I did have several offers for contracting work after we had finished the move, and depending upon what they were, some of them were very lucrative, but most of them required me to go overseas. I wasn't comfortable doing that at the time, especially as a civilian, knowing what civilians tend to go through overseas. So I just put the kibosh on it. We didn't do it, and I stuck with music and the career that I was building in technical support, which in the end paid off.
Before you went in, did you have any firearms experience? And do you still keep in contact with anyone from those times?
Yeah, I actually was able to shoot rifles with my dad pretty periodically when I was a teenager. We had a hunting camp, and we would sometimes just go up there to shoot. He had a 22 and a 30-06, and I was a pretty natural shot at the time. I don't know how good I am now, but at the time, I was pretty good. Between me, finishing high school and the hunting up there not being so great, along with dad wanting to focus more on his retirement, there wasn't really an opportunity for me to shoot a gun again until I was in the Marines. As far as whether or not I keep in touch with anybody during my service days, there's a ton. Too many to name right now. But I do want to give a shout out to Brian Bork, who has been the most consistent friend of mine from the military since I left. Bar none. I love you, dude.
Well, with all of that background in the military, like, what are you going to miss the most about it?
The people. Honestly, it's the people. There's a certain type of community and a certain type of camaraderie that exists between people that are working together towards the same mission that you cannot replace in the civilian sector. That's the biggest thing. I mean, sure, there were days where I really loved being in uniform more than others, and there's certain aspects to that that I will always cherish. But if you wipe all the pomp and circumstance away, the people that I worked with day in and day out are what I'm going to miss the most, period.
This next group of questions is more general about life and philosophy.
The first one is,
how do you balance mental health, physical well-being in your current lifestyle?
bluntly, I don't think that I do, or at least I don't do a very good job. Between some mild PTSD, an anxiety disorder, and the occasional panic attack, my mental health, it ebbs and flows like all of us, I think, but that stuff coming to the fore is only within the last 5 or 6 years. And that's been a difficult thing to cope with. And when you add things like isolation from the pandemic and for other reasons, it doesn't help. So it's been kind of a difficult thing to dig out of. And when you're in that hole, that darkness, certain habits will erupt, whether it's heavy drinking or heavy eating, or in my case, both. So during that isolation period, I did not flourish when it comes to my mental and physical well-being. I was under a lot of stress, and I certainly took it out on the carbs and the booze. But I'm delighted to say that most of my habits are a lot more healthy now. I'm slowly adding more and more exercise to it, and I feel better than I have in years.
Well, that's great and everything. I just hope you make it through this video.
Calm down. I think we're going to be okay.
Well, on the subject of your mortality, how did Godzilla become a philosophy for you, and how does that help you moving forward? Sounds ridiculous.
Fair enough. This deserves some explanation. So, I've always been a huge Godzilla fan. Gigantic. Love the films. I will recommend them to anybody. There's a reason there's Godzilla stuff all over the place on the channel and everything else. And this is something that is a much longer story. And if people want to hear that story, I'll certainly do something about that in a future video, something like that. But the short version is that while I was doing a tech job when I first moved to Iowa in 2012, there's some of the people were doing the online minister thing so they could perform some weddings, and I just was like, well, I could do that. So I did. And some of the guys were like, well, what, you're not a traditional spiritualist or a religious person, what are you going to say you're a priest of? And I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, if there's anything in my life that I could look to and say that I worship it, Godzilla would be the thing, plus the word God in Godzilla, the whole thing. Ha ha, funny joke. Roll on snare drum, everybody laugh, right? Um, but I was like, that's cool. So Godzilla's a kaiju. And then I thought, Judaism, kaijudaism. That is the literal synthesis of this. It was completely made up to justify an ordainment in the Universal Life Church, and they didn't even require me to do that. I just felt I had to define something. So technically, I worship Godzilla. And it may have started as a joke, but I've really leaned into it. And it's a lot of fun, saying Godzilla damn it instead of God damn it and things like that. It's just a lot of fun. And it's something that, is more productive than being bitter about not being in the religion, I guess. I don't know. It works for me. And as far as how it helps me, I think about Godzilla as this figure that hero or villain or somewhere in the middle, you put that guy in a city and he just walks right through it. Nothing stops him. When he decides he's going to go somewhere, he goes. And if someone steps to him, he fights right back. So Godzilla has taught me resilience and just not to give up. It might be cheesy, but you asked.
Ugh, fair enough. While we're on the subject of philosophy, could you talk about the philosophy of Grindhead, whatever the hell that means, and how it relates to what you do?
Sure, that's not too bad. A lot of you might recall or know that Grindhead Jim was a name given to me by Adam McGregor, who was in a band called Crank Radio at the time, later went on to play for Creationist Crucifixion, and he's a journalist now. Late 95, he gives me this name because of all the people in the very vast and varied scene in Western Pennsylvania. I was the guy most known for loving grindcore the most in the entire tri-state area. And I will challenge anyone who fights me on that because, man, I was always wearing a Napalm Death shirt or a Disrupt shirt or a Carcass shirt, etc. It was just something that was really in my veins and really always has been. So when, you fast forward a few years to when I start doing, online stuff, you have to come up with a screen name. I stuck with Grindhead Jim, stuck with it. And it's been that way ever since. So if you think about it, I've been known as Grindhead Jim for over 25 years. So you can see why I might cling to it. I stepped away from it a few times, like when I started That Ruled, but I always came back to it because it was comfortable. I mean, I use this thing online with the band everywhere, and it just became a part of me. And as far as what that means, as far as a definition of a grindhead, point blank, it means you're really into grindcore, which I certainly am. But looking at that, grindcore being a very healthy release of aggression, and by and large, most of the time, it's some kind of very humanistic philosophy or whistleblowing, for the human condition. And so it really kind of reminds me to always try to think empathetically and to consider that everyone's having their own experience and to try and understand that, but not be afraid to be very healthy with the rage if I need to be. That said, I hope I'm living up to the moniker here on the channel because there's certainly just as much empathy as there is rage. At least I hope so.
That is up for debate, bub. Well, since that was about grindcore, the next few questions are about your musical career. What are some of your musical influences, favorite bands, and what instruments do you play?
So I'll start with favorite bands. If I had to pick two, it would be Queen and Napalm Death. That's it. But since I don't have to pick two, Queen, Napalm Death, Anthrax, Disrupt, Crowbar, Mind Rot, Sinister, Cannibal Corpse, Suffocation, John Mayer. No, really, John Mayer. Morbid Angel, Terrorizer, Last Days of Humanity, Severe Torture, Dismember, Entombed, Bloodbath, Hypocrisy. Like, I could go on for a whole long form video of just all the bands that really have influenced me in some way or another. But those are a big chunk of favorites. But that also leads into influences. So if we narrow that a little bit, biggest influences are probably like SOD, Sinister, Napalm Death, certainly Queen, Tears for Fears, Vince DiCola, huge influence on my rhythmic sensibility, stuff like that. and certainly some of the other bands I mentioned, like Crowbar, Terrorizer, Lockup. I could probably ramble for another hour and not be 100% accurate. So my choice of instrument is drums and vocals. And when you narrow it down even that much further, I'd say vocal inspiration is, Mark Greenway from Napalm Death, Mike, the original vocalist for Sinister, Pete Tattengren from Hypocrisy, and certainly Massey Broberg from Hypocrisy. On drums, it's got to be Mick Harris and Danny Herrera from Napalm Death, Charlie Benante from SOD and Anthrax, and Roger Meadows Taylor from Queen.
When you were in cardiac arrest, was there any song you hated to play?
I honestly can't think of one particular song, but for me, with the way that I play drums, my feet, my bass drum technique is easily my weakest point. And so I didn't like playing groups of songs that were too taxing on the feet for too long. So, and there were certainly some songs that were way worse on the old legs than the other ones. So I didn't like playing them that often, but they usually ended up being just fine live. But I would always have some anxiety and a little bit of like hesitation to play those or place those in the set.
During all of your time playing live, what are your best and worst venue stories?
We were on the road quite a bit. We did a lot of festival gigs, and those tended to all be pretty good for the most part. So you'd go into town on a Friday and either play that night or play the next day. And you had at least a day in between there to hang out and watch other bands. Those tended to be pretty cool. And, like Central Illinois Metal Fest, Los Angeles Murder Fest are two of my favorites. They have good venues, good sound. They were pretty cool. But that's kind of like, that's the standard to a certain degree. So without taking anything away from those venues in particular, I want to say that that is what you should expect when you walk into a situation like that. Great sound, great turnout, great stage, good vibe. Beyond that, if you're going to get way better or way worse, these are my choices for that. Let's start with the bad one. Despite it being an amazing show overall, one of the worst venues we ever played in was in Chinatown, New York City. We were on tour with a few other bands, and to load into this place was a really rickety, very treacherous cobblestone and cement staircase that was too narrow for equipment. And getting in and out of there was a real pain in the neck. And it just made it a logistic nightmare. It was really cramped in there. It was too hot, and it was really difficult to enjoy myself. But the show did go well, and I did have a good time, as an overall experience. But it was just hell in a handbasket to get in and out of there. As far as best venue, that's easy. The Opera House in Toronto, Canada. This place had a full-blown stage setup for anything, whether it was opera, a musical, a play, comedy, bands, you name it, they had it covered. They had one of the best PA systems I've ever seen or heard, let alone been heard through. For crying out loud, the sound check for the drums alone was an hour and a half. You never get that kind of treatment in extreme metal. This was rare. And as you might expect, because the sound was so good on and off the stage, we had a better show. The crowd had a better time. Probably one of, if not the best show that I've ever been a part of. Just phenomenal.
All right, here's the last question about music. Most bands start out having cover songs in their set. Was there a song you never quite found your beat, or you just did it like the original, something that just didn't jive?
If we're speaking about cardiac arrest, not really, because this was an established band that I came into. They already had a fair amount of material to play, and the set times weren't long enough where we needed to stretch the songs we had out. As our time slot for our set did get longer early on, it was something we had to do once in a while. Most notably, Mortician's 3 on a Meat Hook was pretty popular. And we didn't play it exactly the same as they played it. We tweaked the arrangement a little bit, tweaked the tempos a little bit, and had some fun with it. But covers were never something that were a big part of the cardiac set. And come to think of it, they weren't really a huge part of any band that I was involved with, despite my desire to do them. People just don't like playing covers when you're trying to get your original music heard, and I understand that. I never played in a cover band full time. I mean, I dabbled in a few just jams with cover bands that were already there. One time I played with a relatively high profile Metallica cover band called Blackened. Did vocals with them a few times, played drums with them once or twice. We became really good friends, and but it was never a regular thing where like they would call me up to sit in or anything like that. It was just if I was there, we'd jam sort of a thing, and not really being in any kind of a situation where that was, the goal. It's not something that came up a bunch. So no, I don't really have a cover song that I just played it straight for no reason, except when I was jamming with a legit cover band that had me sit in for a second.
Finally, we're back to toys. Do you feel that toy collecting helps keep you sane and healthy?
For one, that assumes that I am completely sane and healthy, neither of which are probably true. I'm joking, of course, but I feel stress as much as the next person, and we've already discussed some of my concerns with my health. But if you're asking if, the hobby of toy collecting, helps me keep me happy, absolutely it does. And I think that's true of any hobby that you really care about. And if you're ever doing something as a hobby that becomes a habit or becomes work and it's not giving you happiness, you should stop doing it. So thankfully for me, collecting toys and all the stuff surrounded with it, with the content, is far more fun than not. And as a result, it does contribute to my overall health and happiness, you bet.
What would be your dream toy line?
I've gotten this question a couple times, and I'm pretty sure that my answer always changes because things change, right? Multiple times I've said bring back a fully articulated Star Wars line, in a true 6-inch scale or something a bit bigger. Make them big and meaty. I mean, not unlike what they're doing with RoboForce now. I'd like to see the Star Wars move in that direction. That would be a lot of fun for me. But since we're on the subject, I might as well kind of go ham. Although there have been multiple attempts at Terminator toys throughout the years, I would love to see a 3 3/4 inch scale Terminator line with playsets, vehicles, and figure variants for at least the first two films, but maybe all of them. Because if you did it right, it'd be fun to have different characters and playsets and locations to go with. That would be interesting to me. So if you did like a vintage collection style articulation and attention to detail with Terminator figures, and then you could tie in maybe RoboCop or Aliens, just kind of go with like all movie properties in that scale with that level of articulation and detail. That would be a lot of fun. I don't think that's ever going to happen with everything that's been happening with reaction and certain NECA properties and stuff like that, but that would be a lot of fun for me.
What SH figure arts are you looking into getting? And if you say Monster Arts Godzilla's, good luck on older figures.
Well, the person that asked this probably knows by now that that's exactly what I would say is SH Monsterarts. And I'm not looking at getting a bunch of those figures. In fact, my very first one was a gift for my birthday from Jim Largo. He got me a Godzilla Final Wars figure from that line, which I adore. Um, but at the same time, I've looked at some of the other figures in the line. They're good. I like them, but I don't know that I can justify the cost. So it's not something that I have a ton of interest in, to be perfectly honest.
You've certainly done your fair share of acting, but this question asks, what would your dream casting be for the role of Grindhead Jim in a biopic about you?
I never really thought about that before. I really have to think about that. This is really hard to nail down because all of the actors that I kind of lean into are my age or older. So if they're going to play me in a biopic, they have to be younger so they can play younger me and then play older me as well. And I don't know if there's that many young actors that at least I'm familiar with that I think could, do something that would be fun. So for someone that's close to my age, Matthew Lillard would be my choice. I loved him in SLC Punk. I've seen him in other movies that have varying degrees of success. Looking at You, Wing Commander. But I think it'd be fun to see him, try to come off as me, and maybe have Matthew Lillard in a fat suit would be fun for a minute too. But as far as younger actors that are coming up, I can't really think of any that in my head would function properly if they're telling like the whole story. Um, and that has more to do with me just not knowing a lot of younger actors' names and not paying attention probably as much as I should. Maybe I'll have to come back to this sometime.
Kind of a cop out answer, but I get it. I've only got two more things I want to ask you, and I guess they can kind of go together. As it stands, how do you feel about your place in the YouTube and toy collecting community, and what do you see happening in the future with what you're doing?
Great question. And it's one that I ask myself quite a bit, to be perfectly honest. I might have been doing YouTube on and off for the last 15, 16 years, but it's changed, target so many times because of technological limitations, you know, the evolution of the platform itself, certainly my interests along the way. It's kind of gone back and forth a little bit. And I will say that as a toy collecting YouTube channel, for example, I feel the most comfortable and most productive that I have in any other kind of genre I've slotted myself into, so to speak. This community has been very welcoming from day one, continues to do so. I have friendships that continue to grow through this. And with those friendships continuing to grow, I don't know that I'm going to stop anytime soon. I guarantee you I'll be making this kind of content until at least the end of the Motu Origins line, however long that is. And I'm only even saying that because of the fact that that's the soonest I can possibly think of letting this go, which should not indicate in any way that I am inclined to stop collecting or stop making content. Between, close friends, community members, peers, and everything in between, it just feels good to have this kind of unity towards, just the betterment of the hobby and depth of content that's out there so we can learn from each other, entertain each other, and just have a good time with this stuff, because that's what's important to me. If I have any regrets about being a content creator in this space, it's that so much of my time is taken up with responsibilities from all over, including the content, that I don't get to watch as much content as I would like. I don't get to participate in as much content as I would like. And I certainly don't get to speak to my friends and loved ones and peers as nearly as much as I would like. That's why I went overboard at the beginning of the video to thank a lot of people for helping me out along the way, because I appreciate everyone, past, present, and hopefully future. This is so much fun for me, and it means so much to be a part of this community that, for people to take time out of their day and to put effort and energy into helping me feel a part of the community, even if it's just by in a chat telling me something that I didn't know, let alone participating on my content and communicating and everything else. Like it really is the best. The people that have guested on the show, again, past or present, you're always welcome back, because those conversations continue to inform and enrich me, and I hope that they're entertaining for folks to watch. So sky's the limit with that stuff. Obviously more toys are going to be coming, which means more toy related content. Whether you want to call them reviews or overviews, that's still a term that is weird for me. But there's always going to be focus on specific toys and toy lines and thought pieces. Those are never going away, because there's always something on my mind, right? And live streams every Monday, that's going to continue for the foreseeable future. I like the format that's there. I will continue to have guests on. I like talking about the news. I don't see any reason to change anything. Just take what we're doing, with weekly feature content, weekly live stream, with some other stuff sprinkled in there, and just keep going as long as we continue to be fresh. But I've taken up enough of your time, Grumpy. I appreciate you asking me these questions. It helped me keep track of stuff. So thanks for sticking around. I appreciate it.
Don't mention it. No, really, don't mention it. I have a reputation to consider.
Sure, okay. And to those of you watching, thank you for investing your time. I know this is a really, really long video, but when you come up on a year of doing something that feels more right in a space you have experience in than anything else, you want to celebrate it, right? I've done a bunch of different things in my life, but when it comes to content and entertaining people, this has been the most fun of just about anything I've ever done. And I really wanted to take the time to celebrate it with you guys by giving you answers to a ton of questions that I've been asked over time, and some questions that maybe you didn't think to ask, so that you know me a little bit better. You understand where I'm coming from, my content a little bit better, and maybe it'll bring us together as a community a little more. I know that's a pretty lofty hope, but it's worth trying. I hope you'll continue to support the channel and everyone that I mentioned in this video, because they're all wonderful people, and that includes yourselves. Support yourself. We have covered so much material in this video that I don't think there are any final thoughts to add, except may all your grinds be merry, may all your card backs be straight, and may you be able to find anything you're looking for at any given time at a price you feel is reasonable. Cheers. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to our patrons and members who you're seeing on screen now. Thank you so much for your support. It really helps.